Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Exploring the Lord of the Rings. This is session number 235, and I am delighted to be with you here this evening. It has been several weeks since we've been able to be together. This has been a crazy summer of travel, which is still not done being a crazy summer of travel, actually. In fact, I'm going to not be here again next week for a fun reason. I can't pretend I'm sorry. I'll be sorry to be where I am next week. I will be sorry not to be with you guys, but I won't be sorry to be where I am, because where I will be next week at this time, actually, will be in New York City for the preview event of the first two episodes of The Rings of Power. So I'll be at Lincoln Center watching the first two episodes get screened. So that'll be fun. I won't be able to, I'm not going to be allowed to talk about it for a little while. But anyway, I will get to be there next week with a bunch of people. This is not a private screening for a small group of people. This is going to be a large screening for hundreds of people. So that'll be, that should be a fun event. Many people I'm looking forward to seeing there next week. And then, of course, we begin to get into the excitement of, we get towards, anyway, the excitement of the release of the actual show. Today is the day that the official announcement of the episodes dropped. The actual schedule for the broadcast schedule for the show. Yeah. Joe Snake says, we all want to know when the cast members are coming to class. We'll see. I may invite some folks. We'll see. Anyway, yeah, no, it's going to be, it's definitely going to be a fun time. But let me let you know. Yeah. Karita is posting that we do have calls for papers for several Signum events open. We've got a whole bunch of moots coming up. So of course, some of my travel off to, it's been a mixture this summer. Sometimes I've been off on events. Places I was invited by the Amazon folks to either preview stuff or meet folks and stuff, and that's been fun. It's been really cool to be able to see a bunch of that stuff. Some of the travel I've been doing has been family travel. I'm doing a thing this summer, which I know we're not the only family to have done this, this is the summer in which some plans which were canceled and postponed and rescheduled from 2020 finally happened. So we had two family vacations that we had planned and paid for years apart, which both happened this summer. So that's been another thing. That's where I just was last week, was with my family. And then of course, in addition, there's also been fun Signum events because our regional moot season has begun. So I was just in Cincinnati a couple weeks back, the very end of July for our first ever Buckeye Moot, which was fun. And we have several other events that are coming up. We've got Mountain Moot coming up in Denver next month in September. And then we've got Middle Moot and New England Moot, both happening in Kansas City, Missouri, and in up here in New Hampshire, near me, respectively, in the month of October. And then, of course, the Prancing Pony Moot, hosted by our friends at the Prancing Pony podcast. That's going to be out in Milwaukee at Marquette University on the 22nd of October. And I'm going to be there as well, actually. I'm going to be speaking at the Prancing Pony Moot, so I'll be able to be there as well. Anyway, so that's going to be, and yes, Finn, that is correct. I am going to be guesting, a guest host there at the Prancing Pony podcast for a few episodes, 4 or 5, I think, at the beginning. I volunteered for the very unenviable position to be the first person who is not Sean to be partnered with Alan the Prancing Pony podcast. I'm going to be the transition into the guest co-hosts for this coming year. So that'll be happening. I don't remember all the dates, but September, October is when those are gonna air. So yeah, so that's gonna be happening too. And in addition, of course, you might have heard the announcements. Oh yeah, and Drowsnake, nothing horrible happened to Sean. It's just like it's just a life conflict, basically. They'll be talking about it. They're going to be doing a big celebration for Sean. Yeah, no, he wasn't smitten down by anything horrible, I'm glad to say. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to make sure that everybody had heard about is my new show that is going to be happening, Rings and Realms, exploring Prime Video's Rings of Power. So this is going to be an analysis show that I am hosting, and which is being produced by the co-host of Other Minds and Hands, Maggie Park, which is also being directed and produced by the good folks at Studio Lab up here in Derry, New Hampshire, the video studio up here. And they are doing this amazing job. So what this show is going to be, this is going to be an analysis show. It's not a reaction show. That is, I'm not going to be focused on reactions. We're going to be doing analysis. So the episodes of Rings and Realms are going to drop about a week after. So it's like late Thursday, early Friday, right when the Rings of Power episodes are going to be dropping. And we're going to be releasing the episode, like so the first, we're going to do an intro episode first on the 30th, that'll drop on the 31st of August. But our analysis episodes will come on like the Wednesdays following. So almost a full week before the next episode, when you've had time to watch the episode, think it through, kind of formulate questions and think. This is not a quick reaction show. It's designed to be a deep dive, thoughtful analysis. So that's what we're going to be doing in Rings and Realms. It's going to be. This is not a podcast. This is going to be. It's more like a TV show than it is like a podcast. So it's going to be a fully produced and edited thing. So episodes of this are going to be dropped. It's really kind of spectacular, actually. The studio that I'm working with, Studio Lab in Derry, it's an amazing facility with an incredible group of people up there. And they can do some pretty amazing things in their facility. They have basically the same video 3D digital video technology that they use to film like The Mandalorian and stuff. And so that's the studio I'm going to be shooting Rings and Realms in. It's really cool. I don't even myself totally understand the magic of what's going to be happening here. This is really kind of something that I have very little experience with myself. But anyway, it's going to be pretty cool. So yeah, so where you can find it, Two Juice Man, it's going to be, Rings and Realms has its own YouTube channel. So look up Rings and Realms on YouTube. Also, please do follow it on social media. It's got, we have a Twitter account, Instagram, all the things, And it's affiliated with Signum University, of course. So Signum University and Studio Lab in partnership are producing this. We've created a separate presence for the show, mostly because we don't know exactly the future destiny of the show. It may be that we will just continue it totally independently, as it is currently, as it's currently being put out. It may gain an affiliation with somebody else down the road. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But it is sort of set aside on its own for now, though it, as I say, it's associated, of course, with Signum University and everything that we do there. So this is just gonna, again, this is such a fun adventure for me. I'm going to be doing some filming this week. By the way, another thing. Another thing that's happening this week, just, on the side, John Howe is coming as a guest to Other Minds and Hands tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So we're going to have a conversation. Maggie and I will both be there in the studio, actually. So it'll be our third in a row Other Minds and Hands episode from the studio there, and we'll be joined remotely by John Howe. And our goal there is to have. It's funny. Somebody on Twitter was just asking me today. They were like, "Why didn't you have John Howe like in a couple weeks, right, so that you could talk about the show?" And I did that on purpose. I requested one of these two dates, either this week or next week. I wanted to talk to John Howe prior to the show coming out, and I wanted to do that so that we could talk. I knew once everybody had seen the episodes, it was going to be really hard not to focus on that, on this particular adaptation. And I wanted to talk to John Howe first more about just adaptation in general, thinking about, his reflecting on his career as an adapter, specifically a visual adapter of Tolkien's work. So we're going to be talking about that, kind of how he does it, how he relates himself, how he, when he's doing, when he's doing sketches, when he's doing paintings, when he is in his creative space, how he relates himself to the books, how that adaptation process works for him. That's the thing that is, to me, the going to be sort of the heart of our conversation. I'm sure we'll talk about some Rings of Power stuff as well. Anyway, yeah, exactly, Kron. We're going to talk about how he does it. That's exactly right. There are some other folks from the Rings of Power show that I'm hoping to bring on Other Minds and Hands. I see people were joking about the cast coming and joining us here. I'm not sure how many people are going to join us for Exploring the Lord of the Rings, but Other Minds and Hands is where I think there will be a number of people, both on cast and crew of Rings of Power, who will probably be dropping by Other Minds and Hands sooner or later. But anyway, that's it. And no, those of you who are asking, I have no intention of giving John Howe a hard time about the winged Balrogs. No, I don't. But anyway, so as I say, just a quick reminder, Rings and Realms, if you could just take a second and follow us on Instagram and Twitter and subscribe on YouTube and stuff like that, it would be cool. We're not going to spam you with a whole bunch of stuff, but that way you can get announcements and make sure that you are seeing those episodes as they come. As I say, our premiere episode, our sort of introductory episode, will be on August 31st. So we will see how those go. Yes, Man of Pong, it's exactly what I'm not going to ask John Howe about the Balrog wings. Yeah, there we are. Okay. And yes, Nancy, it is true. Like, people have been teasing me about Rings and Realms and how, like, I'm possibly going to have the time to do all this. And as I said, as I said on Twitter the other day, Rings and Realms has two things that, like, this production, for instance, does not have. One is a script, and the other is an editor, right? And with the help of those two things, I can actually say things much more efficiently than I do here. That's not what we do here, right? This is a good deal more spontaneous, but anyway, okay. So just, I wanted to keep you guys updated about what's going on. There's a lot going on these days, but Rings and Realms is a really, really exciting new project, and I hope that you will join me for that. The episodes are supposed to be, well, I'm not 100% sure, somewhere between half an hour to an hour long, but there we go. So yeah, see, and Matt, and did I mention I'm not the editor myself, right? So I can go on and talk for as long as I want to, right? At the end of the day, the editor can still produce a half-hour show. So, it's not that hard. Anyhow, yeah. Oh, Madagot, yes, I do plan to talk to John Howe about the Hobbit feat issue. I wasn't planning to, try to pin him to the wall on the Balrog wings question, but the Hobbit feet question, I think I probably am going to gonna talk about. So yeah, we'll see. Okay. Yeah, Maria, doesn't the trailer look gorgeous? Oh my goodness. And that was, by the way, this is the answer to another question that I've been getting, which is, how do I possibly have time to do like another, new show like this? And the answer is, I absolutely don't. This has been driven by the team who's doing this. As I say, Maggie Park has been our executive producer, and she's been working with Benjamin Davis, the director of the studio up there at Studio Lab, and their awesome team. And they've been putting together this stuff. I actually hadn't even seen the trailer. I saw the trailer the same time you guys did, actually, because it was produced while I was away traveling with my family. So I was literally like in a weak cell signal near a fjord in Alaska, and watching the trailer from Twitter, same as everybody else. So yeah, no, it's been again an awesome team that we have doing stuff, and this has been a really exciting thing. So. Yeah, and by the way, welcome to all the new people. I see that there's a bunch of folks who have caught up. This is one virtue, I suppose, of having our schedule interrupted by travels and things like that, is to give people a little bit more time to catch up. So welcome to the new folks. Very cool. All right. Well, with this, let us jump back into the text finally. I know this has been a rather prolonged and chatty announcements period here, but anyway, yeah, so glad that you guys could come. So let us move on to Aragorn the Killjoy. So we have just finished being introduced to Hollin. The passage we talked about last time, which was about 3 or 4 years ago, was Legolas talking about the rocks, right, and the memories of the rocks of Hollin. Now we return to action. We move forward to the sequence of their travel. That morning they lit a fire in a deep hollow shrouded by great bushes of holly, and their supper breakfast was merrier than it had been since they set out. They did not hurry to bed afterwards, for they expected to have all the night to sleep in, and they did not mean to go on again until the evening of the next day. Only Aragorn was silent and restless. After a while he left the company and wandered on to the ridge. There he stood in the shadow of a tree, looking out southwards and westwards, with his head poised as if he was listening. Then he returned to the brink of the dell and looked down at the others, laughing and talking. Okay, so first of all, let's recall the immediate context here, right? Gandalf had said that they had now arrived in Hollin, right? So let's. I know you guys always tease me when I go back, but I want to go back just to make sure that, because again, it's been a really long time. Okay, so Gandalf has just said it's for the Dimril Dale that we're making, right? After Gimli was talking about the Azanul Bazaar, the Dimril Dale, which the elves call Nanduhirian. It's for the Dimril Dale that we're making. If we climb the pass that is called the Redhorn Gate, we shall come down by the Dimril Stair into the deep vale of the dwarves. We at least cannot stay in that valley. We must go down the Silver Lode. So he's laid out the plan, right? But then returning back to the immediate future. Let us be glad that the first stage is safely over. I think we will rest here, not only today, but tonight as well. So they're planning a full 24-hour lingering, more than 24 hours, really, right? About 36 hours of rest here in this spot. They're gonna take a whole day off and rest here. There is a wholesome air about Hollin. Much evil must befall a country before it wholly forgets the elves, if once they dwelt there, right? So this is Gandalf's rationale for why they're going to choose. They're taking refuge in Hollin, in part because of its association with the elves, right? There is a wholesome air about Hullen, so that it's not just the rest that they're going to be getting. They are, there we go. It's not just the extra time that they're going to be spending resting. There is some influence there, right? In some sense, on some level, Hullen still smells like elves. Now, what we immediately notice, right? What we immediately notice is that they are in a deep hollow shrouded by great bushes of holly, right? So we have this almost sort of physical literalization of things, right? Just as the land of Hullen, sort of blessed by the presence of the elves, is going to be sort of, I don't know what, nourishing them, right? And sort of watching over them. And the campsite where they are sitting is literally surrounded by these great bushes of holly, which not only provide them shelter, right, from the wind, but also, seem to be almost a sort of an outward representation of that kind of sheltering of that the land of Hullen gives them. So, Arnold, that's a great question. If holly was the token of the elves of Hullen, is that an indication that this spot was once a revered spot, or is holly just very abundant? Well, of course, after so long, it's hard to say, right? They did plant holly trees. Gandalf will say that they did plant holly trees, at important spots. So you can't rule out the idea that this was once a place of some significance. But of course, it's been growing free now for millennia since then, right? So there's no real reason to think that any particular bushes of holly in Eregion were necessarily directly planted there by the elves. And yet, this juxtaposition does, I think, Arnold, sort of invite that kind of association. Yeah, exactly. As Mad Violinist says, 4,700 years can grow a lot of holly trees. Absolutely true. To almost any size they care to grow in that time, for sure. Bjorning, you're right that Legolas says that the plants don't remember the elves, but that doesn't mean that they weren't sort of descended from them. I mean, I think the implication is that the holly trees that stand next to the gates of Moria were planted by the elves. So, and again, those trees, Legolas doesn't tell us specifically about those trees, right? Do they remember better than the other plants and trees of Holland? But again, I don't think that reference to them not remembering, again, it doesn't, I think, even though, remember, Legolas' speech about the plants and the stones comes in direct response to Gandalf's comment that I just went back and read about there being a wholesome air about Holland. So he's responding to that directly. But again, I don't think it's about the direct memories of them. There's something a little bit less, I don't know what, direct, I suppose, than that. Yeah, well, Trifle, I agree. 5,000 years is a very respectable age indeed for a holly tree, right? It does take a lot of believing to imagine that, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. We're not quite up to those holly trees yet. We'll see what cues we get in the text when we get to that point. I mean, I do get the sense from Legolas, it's not just that so many plants have lived and died that, they no longer remember the stories or whatever and don't, retain individual memories. I think it's very possible that an individual tree might forget. Who knows? Rowan says the stones are steadier than pliable trees. Yes, possibly. So Trifle, I think, was also referring a little while back to the horrifying end of the elves of Rhuidean. Yeah, that's true. Though I think I want to be careful about sequencing. I'm wanting to be a little bit careful about. That is to say, I'm not sure that in Tolkien's mind Celebrimbor had yet been nailed to a pole when this passage was written. That is, I don't think the whole story of Sauron and the Wars of Eregion had really unfolded in Tolkien's mind by this time. I mean, he works that stuff out later on. But I'm trying to remember if there's any reference to suggest that that's clearly in his mind at this point. Yeah, I mean, he works that out later on when he's doing the appendices and such. Yeah, exactly. Trifle was adding, it's interesting that Sauron marching across this land doesn't count as great evil. Yeah, great evil must befall a country, right, before it wholly forgets the elves. There are a couple things, I think, Trifle, that we can say to that. One is that simply, again, he wasn't thinking about that yet. You know, that the story of Sauron and the Wars of Eregion post-dated this. We have a clear association, primarily through Gandalf here, but we have a clear association of this realm with peace, right? It's not yet associated with war and tragedy. The war and tragedy will come when Tolkien does turn his mind to actually working out the history of this region. It turns out to be one of warfare and tragedy, right? But it hasn't really necessarily really taken shape, and so is therefore in his mind as he's writing this passage not the dominant story of this area. The second thing is that I'm wondering, Trifle, if even the war with Sauron is the sort of evil that Gandalf is referring to. Much evil must befall a land before it wholly forgets the elves. Yes, but of what kind and of what duration? I'm thinking in particular here of a phenomenon I've talked about it on many occasions. We've talked about this a lot in my Lotro explorations, actually. It's come up many times because in the Lord of the Rings Online, in their adaptation, they're very sensitive to this, and they do a lot with this kind of thing. And this I'm referring to is the idea of the presence or the dwelling of evil in an area causing desolation, right? The kind of simplest version of that is the desolation of Smog in The Hobbit, right? We just see by the mere fact that the dragon is there, and we get it sort of physicalized in some way with Smaug, like he literally stinks. You know, the reek of the dragon and the smoke and everything, right? But there's clearly something sort of metaphysical involved there as well, right? It is sort of the evil influence of the dragon that has blasted. You know, Dale was a beautiful green valley, and it is not anymore, right? And it's clearly, and we may remember Balin's memories, right? When Balin and Bilbo are walking together exploring the Lonely Mountain when they first arrive, and Balin is looking down into what had been the fair green valley of Dale, and he's wistfully reminiscing about how beautiful it used to be, and now it's a blasted wilderness instead, right? No green, nothing growing. And this is not, I think, because Smaug routinely just comes up and, you know, burns off the countryside. And he's been in there for quite some time, right? More than long enough for green to return, green of some kind at least, to return to the lands. But it hasn't done, right? And it hasn't done because of how he just again his presence. Now we see this much more pointedly and much more poignantly with Sauron, right? As Sam and Frodo approach. If we remember ahead to Sam and Frodo approaching the Black Gate, remember Sam's "I feel sick" line, right? As he's looking about at what Tolkien, doubtless remembering his recalling some of his horrible memories from World War I, called No Man's Land, the area around the Black Gate, right? Sauron has destroyed the land about him. Simply has been destroyed, right, by Sauron's presence. Mordor, of course, has been blasted deeply in the same kind of way. We will see, of course, the same thing has happened to Isengard, somewhat ostentatiously in some ways. That is, Saruman seems to have adopted, waste and desolation practically as, like, the new chic, right? Like it's almost like Saruman feels that, like, in order to be a real power, like Saruman seems to cultivate desolation around him, almost like an insecure junior high student, right, who's trying to fit in with the cool crowd, right? Like all the cool dictators have desolation and waste around them. So I'm gonna create that too, and we see him manufacturing that through his deforestation practices and things at Isengard, and of course we see him undertaking the similar kind of thing in the Shire, right? So anyway, so all of this is to say there's lots of examples, right? There's lots of instances of this kind of trend, and so Trifle, this is an enormously long-winded response to your suggestion before, but that is, I'm wondering if that's the kind of, when Tolkien is talking about much evil must befall a land before it wholly forgets the elves, I wonder if that's the sort of thing that he has in mind, right? The elves, this place remembers the elves not because they passed through, right? The blessing of the elves, the happiness, the joy, the bliss of the elves in this place was not a transitory thing. They were happy here for a long time. They lived here, right? And they therefore filled this land with their own joy, with their own blessing. In order for this land wholly to forget that I think would have to be displaced by something equal and opposite, not just passing through. And I'm not trying to downplay how horrible the wars of Sauron and the Elves of Eregion were, and the atrocities that happened, and poor Celebrimbor and all that kind of thing. I'm not trying to say that that's not awful, because it totally is. But what I'm saying is, I think it's not enough to make the land forget. The elves. Yeah. And yes, as Bjorning in Exile recalls here, the elves interacted with the land of Eregion. Deep they delved us, high they built us, right? Those are the things that they remember. Sauron's orcs just marched across, right? They were gone in a blip, and it was horrible. And I'm not saying that kind of thing can't leave its mark necessarily on places, but yeah, there does seem to be, to use a totally different metaphor, a certain amount of momentum, right, in the blessing of this country, that one single war, howsoever bad, is probably not enough to counterbalance. I don't know, but that's sort of my idea anyway. Yeah, we will have to remember this conversation decades from now when we get to the Scouring of the Shire. Absolutely. This is going to be the Scouring. In some ways, actually, Trifle, I think that the Scouring of the Shire is a really interesting payoff of a lot of these things happening, right? I'm not saying that Tolkien described all of these things, the desolation of Smog, Mordor, Isengard. I'm not saying that he described all of those things all just as a setup for the Scouring of the Shire. But I do think that there's a kind of payoff in the Scouring of the Shire. We like the hobbits themselves, we've learned a thing or two, right? We've come to understand more about how the world works, the big world works, and so we can come back and see a kind of significance that others in the Shire won't necessarily see, and we wouldn't have seen, right, if we'd not been through that. But anyway, so we will see. We'll see later on. Later on, we'll get to the scouring of the Shire. Yeah, Dollar Stroke says the implication is that the elves' influence would last forever unless evil comes. Yeah. I think he does seem to imply that. And by the way, that is an old idea in Tolkien's imagination, like way back to the 19-teens. You go back to some of the very earliest things Tolkien wrote, some of his old elfin poetry. I'm not thinking of Goblin Feet specifically, but especially Cortirion Among the Trees, if you've ever read Cortirion Among the Trees. And especially, by the way, not the version, the later version that's in The Adventures of Tom Bombadil, but the early version, the one you can find in the Book of Lost Tales, Volume 1. So the version that he wrote back in like 1914, I think it was. And what that poem is about places in modern England that still remember the elves, basically, where you can still feel the influence and presence of elves, of fairies. So yeah, that's a very, you could almost say, this would be a big claim, right? Starting is a big claim for anybody, but you could almost say that concept, the concept of the land always retaining the memory of elves who were there, is one of the places where Tolkien's his entire mythology began, was sort of starting from that concept. So yeah, we're going, these little kind of throwaway lines in Holland here, in what is honestly, in the context of the Lord of the Rings narrative itself, a whole throwaway region, frankly. I mean, very little of lasting importance is going to happen while they're in Holland. And, compared to the other lands that they travel to and the other characters that they meet, I mean, when you put you just kind of take the places the Fellowship visits, right? Are the places that the narrative goes to. And you think about Lothlorien and even like Rauros and Parthgalen, right? Ithilien, Minas Tirith, Rohan, Mordor, right? All of the, Isengard, Fangorn, right? All of the regions that they go to, and all of these places have like really important characters and really important, and when you put Holland, right, the Holland that we get, the not the Holland of our imagination, right, not the Holland of kind of reconstructing the Second Age. Of course, Holland is very important with the Rings of Power being forged there and everything else. And of course, because of the new TV show, we're thinking about Eregion a lot these days. But again, when you take it out of that context, you just think about the story, just its role in the story, right? It's much less significant than almost any other little chapter, right? You look at the itinerary, even backwards, right? The Shire, Bree, the Old Forest, the Weathertop, right? The Fort of Bruinen. The significance of the time that they spend in Holland is just not as great. I mean, it's a pretty minor incident. This whole thing is a pretty minor incident, right? And yet, as I say, it's got really deep roots, and there's some very, very profound things that kind of bubble to the surface here. I think I was trifolk counting Carothras as its own location, but at the same time, even if we included Carothras, I mean, Carothras is sort of significant, but it's more indirectly significant, right? I mean, again, still, when you compare even the whole Carothras incident to other major incidents that occur, like the attack at Parthgalen, or I think of other like major roadblocks, right, or obstacles that they face and confront over the course of their journey. Carothras, even Carothras, is a pretty minor figure in that list. But anyway, yeah, Bjarnasonar, you're right. Holland's whole thing is how empty it is. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, okay, cool. Nancy is remembering the "It's Saruman" line. We'll get there. We'll get there. Okay. All right. Where were we? Shrouded by great bushes of holly. That's where we've been, right? As this sort of physical representation, in a sense, almost like the bushes are, as I say, a physical manifestation of the memories of the elves. Not that the bushes themselves remember the elves, right? But that the bushes themselves are like a manifestation of those memories themselves. That blessing, that peace, that sheltering protection. And notice the consequences. Their supper breakfast was merrier than it had been since they set out. The consequence of camping in Holland, right? The effect of the wholesome air of Holland is merriment. Right? Merriment. They're tired and need rest, presumably. They're hungry and want food, presumably. But it's not these things for which this rest stop seems to be calculated. And again, Gandalf's description of it seemed that he was thinking of that explicitly. It's their spirits that need boosting up. Remember what we were seeing in the last few pages prior to this, of the Hobbit spirits, right? Not just of the physical difficulties, right, of the journey that they've been confronting, but the discouragement that they've been facing, that feeling of being like snails crawling along and all that sort of thing. But now they have merriment. When you get what happens when you spend time where the Noldor of Eregion, where the High Elves, right, the Noldor of Eregion lived, you get a little tra-la-la-lolly seeping up out of the stones into you, right? Again, you guys, I've brought this up many times, right? But of course, you will hear many people say, "Oh, the elves of the Lord of the Rings are completely different from those elves of the Hobbit." They're not totally different, and here we see it again, right? What effect does elf influence have upon them? Merriment. Right. They're going to be, singing Tra-la-la-lolly and baking bannocks before you know it here, if this keeps up. So, yeah. Anyhow, so that's a really fun little note, right? This is as merrier than it had been since they set out. From Rivendell, right? The heart of Tra-la-la-lolly in Middle-earth. They did not hurry to bed afterwards, for they expected to have all the night to sleep in, and did not mean to go on again until the evening of the next day. So you notice, they don't just get into a tra-la-la-lolly frame of mind, right? Remember that encounter between the elves, Bilbo's first encounter with the elves that we see at the beginning of chapter 3 of The Hobbit, in the famous Tra-la-la-lolly episode, right? Remember what happens. Bilbo and the dwarves are arriving. They've just had a fairly harrowing experience with the trolls, right? They've been on the road now for several weeks and they're exhausted. And they arrive at evening, right? In like the evening gloaming, and the elves are singing tra-la-la-lally. And what do the elves do? They invite Bilbo and the dwarves to stay out and sing with them all night long, right? As if the only real rest that you could possibly need is not sleep, right? But is in, a steady serving of tra-la-la-lally with a side of bannocks, right? So yeah, we see that exact same pattern happening here, right? They're going to rest, which doesn't mean primarily they're going to get extra sleep, right? They are going to have the opportunity for extra sleep, right? So obviously they're not simply saying, instead of sleep, let us tra-la-la-lally the night away. That's not the explicit plan here. But it is an interesting sort of parallel, right? There is something even more fortifying than sleep, right? And in this case, the merriment that they are enjoying together does seem to sort of factor into that, I think. Yeah. There is a sudden contrast in mood, Connor, both in that chapter of The Hobbit and here in The Lord of the Rings. Yeah. And notice how what we're going to get as a consequence of that, right? There's a lot of, laughing and talking, we are told, happening, right? The merriment is continuing. The merriment, it's not just that the meal was merry, right? The merriment is spilling on into the day when normally they would be collapsing into sleep, right? Preparing themselves to, get up and begin another long march as soon as it starts to get dark as they're traveling by night. That would be the normal routine, right? But now the merriment is going to continue on into the daylight hours. And that really gets emphasized in this set of paragraphs here, of which, tonight's passage is the beginning. We're going to see a lot of banter, right? A lot of hobbitry, a lot of joking. But yet we're also going to see Aragorn holding himself aloof from all of that, right? Only Aragorn was silent and restless. His silence sets his activity aside from their activity, right? They are not silent. They're laughing and talking, right? The merriment is effusive, it seems, right, in their camp. And Aragorn is silent. So his silence sets them apart from their activities. His restlessness sets him aside from their attitude, right? Where they are releasing tension, right? They're releasing anxiety. They are finding encouragement and comfort and everything. He is not, right? He is restless. He can't rest. He can't let go. He won't let down his guard. Now, Terston, that's a really great point. It's hard to imagine Boromir being merry. I totally, by the way, I often complain about the movies, and I want people to think I just hate the Peter Jackson movies. So let me praise them here. The scene with Boromir and Merry and Pippin on the mountain, like when they tackle him, and then when he's teaching them to fight and they tackle him and stuff. Love that scene. I thought that was a wonderful, wonderful scene. That really, because we don't get much of Boromir in the book, or we just don't. And yet, that's exactly a kind of scene that I felt like it seemed right. Like, yeah, that's exactly the kind of thing that would have happened. Like they would have gotten to know Boromir. And I definitely can see. I definitely can see something like that. Something like that happening. So yeah, there are lots of great reasons for like the I mean, of course, the Merry and Pippin's, the way that gets paid off, and Merry and Pippin standing there, the look on Merry and Pippin's faces when they're watching Boromir get filled full of arrows right in front of their faces right at the end. I mean, that the shock and the grief there, it pays off beautifully within the film. But more than that, yeah, I think we do see it retrospectively from Pippin's perspective in the book Musicale. Eventually, we're going to get towards that kind of thing, that he says that he had liked Boromir from the beginning, right? Anyway, yeah, no, I'm going to say I don't think we have any reason to think that Boromir is holding himself aloof here from the merriment. I bet you Boromir's a fun guy. He seems to be genuinely not just respected but loved by his people. And I think so. I don't think he's a stiff necessarily, but yeah. Anyway, right. Highlander Wind says Boromir seems like a frat guy. To be honest, maybe, possibly. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, exactly how much fun was Boromir at parties? I can see that going a couple different ways, right? I really could. But I certainly think that he would be personable. What I don't see is him merely holding himself aloof, right? Yeah. Oh man, Kron, that's a really complicated question. Comparing and contrasting the different reactions of film viewers and book readers to the increased presence of Boromir and the increased presence of Saruman. I think that would get even me too far afield to address that too much. Maybe I can come back to that and talk about that on a Grifflet stream sometime. That'd be fun. But anyway, yeah. Anyway, yeah, Ambrosius, it's a really good question. I was just kind of toying with that question my own self. Should we think of him as closer to an early medieval knight or to Beowulf? I want to say knight. I think he's closer to Sir Lancelot than he is to Beowulf, culturally speaking. I think, but I'm not 100% sure. Yeah. But of course, neither one is exact. It's not like, those are our two possible paradigms. Well, Valori depends on which Lancelot, right? I'm a Mallory guy. It's Thomas Mallory. Mallory's version of the story is my favorite version of the story. So I'm always thinking of Mallory characters, and so I'm thinking of Mallory's Lancelot, whom I like quite a bit. Not John Cleese's Lancelot, Evil Dr. Cannon, absolutely. Anyway. Okay. This is me waving away every temptation to go down any one of these rabbit holes, because Boromir is not even mentioned in this passage, other than the important question of people participating in the merriment. But let's move on past Boromir here. I see no reason to believe Boromir is not participating in the laughing and talking. Gimli, I believe. Legolas, we know that Gandalf and the Hobbits are, right? That's the easiest thing to imagine. The only question is, can anybody else keep up with Gandalf and the Hobbits, right, for the talking and laughing portion of this program, right? So yeah, I think that we are instructed to imagine that Boromir and Gimli and Legolas are going to all be involved in the merriment and the laughing and the talking, and going to be contributing their own. I mean, Gimli, I think, was already was helping, right? I mean, his speech wasn't exactly a laugh riot, right? But yet was sort of a boost to the spirits, right? And we talked about sort of the significance of it, like the extent to which Gimli is, if not oversharing in the sense of being inappropriate, but certainly sharing more than he had to in his talk about Khazad-dûm and his own dreams, literally his dreams and all that kind of thing. But yeah, opening up and bonding, I definitely see that happening. In musical, I absolutely agree. When at the end, Aragorn returns to the brink of the dell and looked down at the others laughing and talking, I think it's clearly the other 8, right, who are all laughing and talking together. So absolutely, I believe that we are invited to imagine all of those things. So it does, in my opinion, give us the license to imagine Boromir, Gimli, and Legolas, and what kinds of contributions they would be making to the merriment. The other thing I'd offer there, with Legolas and Gimli, it's actually pretty easy. Think about the kind of relationship that Legolas and Gimli show with Merry and Pippin when they're reunited, the bantering that happens when they're reunited in Isengard later on, right? There's clearly affection and fun. There's obviously merriment in their past, right? So I think that we definitely have that here, right? Now, but let's get to Aragorn, because he's the one that these paragraphs are actually about. We talked about his silence and his restlessness. He does not enter into this same attitude. After a while, he left the company and wandered on to the ridge. There he stood in the shadow of a tree, looking out southwards and westwards, with his head posed as if he was listening. Then he returned to the brink of the dell and looked down at the others, laughing and talking. Okay, so is he remembering Elendil and Gilgalad Bjorning? I'm not sure. Hang on. Let's move ahead here for a second. I want to go back to our map. So here we are in Holland, presumably somewhere near the word where the word Eregion Holland is here on the map, right? And because there's Carothras, down here is the Dimrill Dale, so presumably like this particularly spiky tooth-like mountain here would probably represent Carothras or something. Okay, so there we are. He's looking south, which is over the land between them and Moria Gate, right, between them and the pass. And he's looking west, out towards the Swanfleet River, the Mythaethel. He is not looking east to the Misty Mountains. Yeah. Arno, I agree. There is lots of reason for him to look south, right? Even if for no other reason than that's the direction they're going, right? Is there anything to be alarmed about in the direction that they're heading, right? So he needs no excuses to be looking off towards the south. Looking off towards the west, I'm not really sure about. I don't see any reason, like the map doesn't suggest to me any obvious reasons why he's looking. Almeria, I agree that of course we do get the general association of looking to the west with hope, right? If you're looking, sort of to the west, capital W, right? But I think I agree with Arnold that he seems to be, well, it doesn't say that he's worried, but he's restless. I don't think he's looking, I don't think we have any reason to think that he's, finding hope or encouragement from looking to the west. And he's looking and listening in both of those directions, right? Yeah. Yes, as Musical says, what he hears, as he's going to explain, is a lack of noise, right? And it seems to be from the west that he is not hearing what he is not hearing, right? As it turns out, as he's going to come back and explain here pretty soon, probably in a fortnight. But yes, I don't think he's looking where help might come from, because I don't think he's anticipating any help. Not like that, right? One doesn't look for the west hoping that, like, oh, I don't know, a giant eagle or something is going to swoop in and help you, right? He's not looking for a convenient moth. That's not the sort of help that one gets from the west. That's not that we don't get that kind of association. Yes, Evil Dr. Cannon, I think it's exactly that. I think that the silence in the west is stranger than silence in the east. The mountains are more likely to be silent, usually, right, than the lands off to the west. Again, what is off to the west is this, sort of hilly but fertile region that lies between them and the Swanfleet River, right? So you would expect that to be more full of life. Where is the angle of the Loudwater and Horwell in relation to where they are? No, I don't think he's looking towards home, Christopher. He's that would be more that would be from where they are up to the northwest, basically. Yeah, exactly. So that wouldn't be exactly the direction that he's looking. I don't think it's a again, but mostly I see we get no cues, nothing to suggest that he's looking hopefully or, anxious. All we're told is that he's looking with his head posed as if he was listening, right? We don't know exactly what he's listening for yet. He's going to explain in just a little bit. But given his explanation soon, exactly, attentive is what we get here, Musical. And also notice cautious as well. He's standing in the shadow of a tree. It's daylight, recall, and they're trying to keep a low profile. So he stands in the shade so that he can't be seen. He doesn't just he goes up on the ridge so that he can look about and he can listen about. But he does stand in the shadow of a tree. He does conceal himself to some extent up there. He certainly can see further to the south and west, certainly than the east, Arnold, we know for sure. See, again, Julia, we can imagine, I think, that he could be doing something like saying goodbye to the Kingdom of Arnor. But again, we need to have some cue from the text we can imagine these things, right? But I don't see any reason to think, again, that he's hopeful, that he's wistful, that he's looking towards home. I don't see any of these. I don't see any hint or indication, right, that would prompt us in that direction. And we would need something in order to sort of justify that. Again, we can imagine that it would sort of fit. It's possible to do, but yeah, I don't think that we have any hint of that. No, Matt, I think he's out. Matt is asking would his view of the other cardinal points be blocked by the holly trees. He leaves the dell, I think, entirely. It says that he goes up onto the ridge, so I think he's left the great bushes of holly behind entirely and found a different tree, right, that he's standing under, but one from which he can presumably see in whatever direction he wants to see. And yes, Jackie, I agree. The listening seems to be the most important thing right? That's the thing our attention is drawn to with the narrator's description of his head posed as if he was listening, right? And it does seem that more than anything else, he wants to get away from the merriment of the party. But notice what he doesn't do, and several of you are pointing this out. Aragorn is holding himself aloof. He is not joining either in his action or his attitude with the rest of the company here. But he's also not merely being a killjoy. He could do, right? He could have, back at the camp, just said, hey, everybody shut up for a minute, right? Just shut up. I need to listen. He could have gone that way, right? But he's not gone that way. And I think you could see a couple different reasons for that. One, of course, would be purely practical, in that what he's wanting to hear is what the rest of the countryside is doing while they are talking, right? So to some extent, he's sort of like not disturbing the environment in that way. Like, let me sneak off and to see what you sound like from this distance and that kind of thing. But at the same time, he's also, I think, not going to undermine Gandalf's plan. Gandalf has a good reason for doing this, right? Gandalf himself is part of the merriment. He's in there laughing and talking and joking with everybody else, right? And this is part of the plan. They need not only physical recuperation, they need to build their spirits back up. And Aragorn gets that. He's not gonna get in the way with that. Yeah, exactly. Convenient moth. It was just saying the same thing. Now, Jeff, it is possible that he's gone up onto the ridge to compose a poem. You really can't rule that out, of course. But we'll see. We'll see. We don't get any evidence that he's composed any poetry up here, but that would be fun. Okay. Yes, and as Jackie says, Aragorn's a captain and leader of men too. He knows. Yeah, he absolutely does know. Then he returned to the brink of the dell. So again, notice he doesn't just leave the dell and stand up at the edge of it, right? He leaves the dell behind completely, because now he's returning to its brink, to its upper edge, and he's looking down at the others, laughing and talking. So this image of Aragorn standing above them this is sort of, the final image of this paragraph is, I think, a really interesting one. It's one of course, it reminds me of Balin, the lookout man, right, whose job it always was to stand lookout for the dwarves in The Hobbit. We see the vigilance of Aragorn, this idea of Aragorn. I do think that there is an element of self-sacrifice here, right? Aragorn's not a complete stiff. He could let himself go and, enjoy himself with the rest of them here. But he has taken it on himself to be alert instead, right? And I think it will seem that there's something bothering him here. Green Great Dragon says, Aragorn, will you not come down? That would be a different context now, wouldn't it? Yeah. And Sarah, I do think he would be, in a sense, in the habit of doing this on his own as well. He's certainly used to traveling alone and keeping this kind of watch, right? But clearly, this is one of the, we've seen him, from the, Aragorn knew the paths even in the dark reference, right, that we got several pages ago. We know that him being their guide is one of the roles that he has here, right? And by the way, I think in this we can already see one of Aragorn's, one of sort of the tensions of Aragorn's role already beginning to grow, don't we? Right. On the one hand, why is Aragorn with them? What's his job in the company? Well, don't forget, first and foremost, his job in the company is to go to Minas Tirith. That's why he's there. He and Boromir are present because they have business in Minas Tirith. Had the Company of the Ring not been setting out for Mordor, Aragorn and Boromir would still have been marching south together to go to Minas Tirith, right? They are involved in the Company of the Ring because the Company of the Ring is also going south for a very long time, right? And so therefore, he's traveling with the company. But that's his number one job. His number one job is to get to Minas Tirith. That he's been called, right, by the vision. This is what he is supposed to do. Anyway, he so he, on the one hand, that's his primary job, but on the other hand, we see already from the beginning he is very useful to the company, right? He is very much putting his experience and skills at the disposal of Gandalf, who is in charge, and of the rest of them. And this is, of course, what is going to lead to his problems later on. He's going to have a real dilemma by the end of Book 2, right? The dilemma of what is he supposed to do? Is he in Gandalf's role as the leader of their party? It seems obvious that Frodo is going to need a guide to get to Mordor, and a guide and guard to get into Mordor, and who better than Aragorn, right? So it seems obvious to him that that's what he should be doing after Gandalf's fall, right? And yet, he got some pretty clear marching orders to go to Minas Tirith, didn't he? So, and that's what he, that's what he set out to do. So anyway, that tension is already beginning, right? His traveling with the company is, in one sense, of course, just a matter of convenience. He's en route to Minas Tirith, but of course, along the way, he is going to perform this role. And absolutely, Salma Truta, I completely agree with you. It's not that Aragorn's role is just spiritual here. Absolutely, very practical. That's one of the things I'm trying to emphasize right here. Extremely practical, right? In his scouting and woodcraftiness and all of these things, but also in his vigilance, right? That he is the one who takes on himself that setting himself apart, right? Silent and restless. The restless, I think, is not a choice on his part, right? That, I think, is he feels that there's something wrong, right? And that's why he can't enter into the spirit of merriment. But he's aware of that because he is holding himself vigilant. Exactly, as Valori says, my Numenor senses are tingling. Something like that. Well, we will return to this image of him standing on the brink of the dell and looking down at the others laughing and talking. Because, of course, in the next passage, we will talk about the interaction that he has with them. And we will see him coming into direct contact with the merriment that is afoot down there in the dell. But in the meantime, we should end there. We've come to the end of this passage, and I should not recklessly begin a new one because it is getting late. So for those of you who joined us late, I just want to remind you I'm not going to be around next week. Next week I'll be in New York at the premiere of The Rings of Power down there, seeing the first 2 episodes, so that'll be fun. I'll tell you guys about that, except I won't be able to tell you guys about that, but I'll tell you everything that I can tell you about it when I get back. But anyway, we shall return for another discussion 2 weeks from tonight, because I believe I will be here then. All right. Thanks, everybody. And it's time for our field trip. So those of you who are sticking around for our field trip, you can come and join us here. And good night to everybody who could only make it for the book discussion here tonight. How are you this evening, Valori?
I'm doing great. Happy birthday, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Many happy returns of the day.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's been fun. Well, just like getting home was like my my birthday present today.
Yeah, I can relate.
I had about one of those like multi-stage, about 24 hours of travel, getting home, and
Nice.
arrived home today at about I don't know, 10 a.m. or something. So
Yeah, that was me last week when we were coming back from the beach, and I love the beach. It is my favorite place in the world. But after like 7 days of 90-degree heat, you're just sitting there thinking how nice air conditioning is.
oh man, you know, I often say, I was saying to my family as we were driving home from the airport in Boston this morning, that you know, I never know what makes me happier. The day that we leave, you know, to go traveling, to go on some fun adventure together, or the day that we come home. Like, I'm always equally happy on both days. Like, it's different, right? It's different, but it's really cool.
Yes,
Um,
I am a creature of habit when it comes right down to it, and yes, I believe coming home can be just as delightful. See
Absolutely,
your own little groove on the couch.
absolutely, yeah. Okay. Um,
Okay. Oh,
well, we're gonna head back to the Yondershire. I think No Bottle is where we pick up. No Bottle is like the
yeah, I
center
believe so.
of all things there. Um, but yes. So let us head over to No Bottle and let's continue our exploration of the countryside here. Some people were asking me last time, hey, like, we're in Eregion in the story, like, why aren't we exploring the area that, you know, is being discussed here? And the answer is we will. We saved some of it. We started off in Eregion at the same time, exploring Eregion at the same time we started this chapter, but that was a long time ago, and the landscape in Lotro is not infinite. So if we go back to the map here for a moment, there's Eregion. We did explore most of Eregion before. We deliberately saved this sort of patch over here on the eastern side of it. The Redhorn Pass, of course, the Karathras part, and the hill where they are not too long from now going to be encountering the wolves. All of those incidents have a representation here in the game, and we will definitely look at the game's adaptation and sort of depiction of those places when we get to those places. So we saved those areas in the game in anticipation of those passages, but we're still waiting. Of course, the landscape. So where are we headed? We're headed. We're going to go to the Old Links because I think that's the. I think that's the stable master we've missed so far as well. So let's head out towards the Old Links, and then we can. Wait, where am I going? That's just not the way. This is the way. Okay, here we go.
This is the way.
Before I start talking again, I'm going to make sure I'm going in the generally right direction. Yes, okay, great. All right. Yeah, so of course, Lotro is an enormous game area and a beautifully detailed game area. But I forget, does anybody remember offhand what the actual scale is in Lotro? I forget the ratio. I knew it once, but I've forgotten it. The sort of game space, the approximate ratio of space. But in any case, it's large as this is, it's not actually the same size as Middle Earth, right? So there are some places in the game that they have carefully created, such as the dell under Weathertop you can find, and places like that. I don't think that this particular dell with the holly bushes, for instance, that they found, I don't think that that's in the game. At least I don't remember seeing it. If anyone has found a place that they think is that dell with the holly bushes around it, I would definitely go and see it, but we'll see. Yeah, Drusnik, I've heard that too. A player's walking speed, if actually projected to the size of the real landscape, would be about somewhere around the speed of sound. Which, yes, I could easily imagine that.
I can dig it.
Yeah. Anyway, so okay, and here's our friend the stable master that I was looking for.
Ah, yes.
I still can't help but find this an extraordinarily random stable master. Let us first try to figure out what is this guy's excuse for being a stable master. The only thing that we can see... Well, express on the way to what? I mean, if we carry on this road, where do we end up? Oatbarton?
Yeah.
I guess.
I can't see where that road goes to even.
Hey, I know. Let's find that out. But in any case, even without doing that, the only thing that we can see in this area, we've got this large bald hill. We've got this ruin up in the mountains behind us, but that's still no excuse for building a stable master down here. And we've got this fence. This old fence. Very old. Very old stone fence.
Definitely just built out of rocks they dug up in the way.
Yeah, it absolutely looks like, though it's fairly tall, it absolutely looks like, as you say, we dug up all these rocks while we were tilling and need a place to put them kind of boundary wall. Yeah, it's partly between... I mean, there's no other Yondershire settlements anywhere around here.
Not like a singular house somewhere?
I don't think so. So, I mean, I guess you've got to think that this is just a kind of a waypost. Because, I guess you could say, because it's the middle of nowhere, you want a place to, rest and change horses here, a camp to... But it's it's a little hard to explain. And I can't Trifle, I can't exactly take the sort of metagaming explanation. That's not my kind of explanation. Namely, that you need a way to get back and turn in your quests when you finish up out here, which is true enough. But that is not the kind of answer that's going to satisfy me. Notice the gaps in the wall. Again, suggesting the age of this. Now, this kind of wall, we've seen this kind of wall in a couple places, though not everywhere. Can somebody, which town in the Yondershire has stone walls like this? These kind of piled up stone boundary walls. Can anyone pinpoint that? I know we see the different kinds of construction and the different kinds of materials that are used, the red brick in No Bottle and all the wood in Gamage and the stone up in Longcleave, the stonework up in Longcleave, the plaster buildings out in what's it called, Tyfield.
I can't think of Yondershire, but it does look like the stone wall you see along the Greenway.
Yeah. We see some Arnorian ruins down there, but also some older stone. What do you think this was the boundary of? Because, I don't know. The Shire's been around for over a millennium, so that's a long time for any stone wall. Even the stone walls.
Like it's been raided.
Yeah.
It's very tall for a Hobbit stone wall as well.
It is very tall for a Hobbit stone wall.
Yeah. It's either that or, it's like either they had a lot of rocks to put away or, this was a human wall. It's even tall for a human wall, though.
Yeah. I wonder. So looking at... And it's so straight. So straight. Where does
I
it
don't
go?
think they had
Yeah.
Romans around here.
No, but they did have, people descended from the Numenorians, and that's kind of the same thing.
Right.
This actually looks a lot like stuff you see in like Brocken borings and Scary and stuff like that, where you got these big stone walls and they'd have the arches you'd ride under that just mark off little bits of the Shire. So I think it's very similar to that. Are those not Shire gates then? Are those Arnorian gates?
Yeah, I gotta think. So remember that this was yeah, no, Tomas is pointing out that if these walls were built for cattle, it's the size of the cows that matter rather than the size of the builders.
These be Oryx though.
Well, yeah, it would be very. I mean, like, you don't need to build a wall higher than the head of a cow, usually.
Yeah. Are they raising elephants?
Yeah, you wouldn't
Yeah,
think
where
so.
I
mean,
raise cows.
Yeah.
In the buffalo.
Oh, and here's a cliff.
Oh, the other one is to keep wolves out, which we've had proven evidence that that's a problem.
Wolves. Yeah. Possibly. I mean, this wall stretching. Okay, so I think it's not just a boundary marker. I mean, look how it stretched all the way to the cliff, right? So it did seem to be designed to keep something out.
And look from here you've got a great view of the road below, and it would be very defensible.
Yes.
If
Right.
the wall was intact, all you'd have to do is knock off the bottleneck, and they'd have some trouble getting over this without people taking
True.
them off.
True. But here's my problem here. And that is this wall designed to keep people out or to keep people in? That is to say, which side of the wall were we on?
I think it's a corral, because the point is if you have a wall, that means people can't just come in willy-nilly. They have to come in through a certain point. Which would be at the road over there.
Yeah.
So it's more of a discouragement. It's a keep off the grass for the next 100 miles.
Right. It's possible that this was built by hobbits when the Yonder Shire was settled, because they did want to use this big open field and this big hill, right, as like pasturage. Because on this side, well, we've got forest on both sides, really, but...
Well, yeah, but it's been a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? It really depends on what historical period this wall was built in, right? Because on the one hand, if it's built in the Yonder Shire period, then it is... then it's with the direction I'm facing, the right-hand side of the wall, like the north side of the wall, which is civilization, right? And the side that we're riding on right now is the side on the other side of civilization, right? This is like Evendon is where the wild country is now, right? The wild and unsettled country.
And we know
whereas
for farming if they got all these rocks out of the ground.
Right. Yeah, whereas if you were man, it just keeps going, this wall. It went all along the road. So this is the same one as all along the road here.
That's my point. You're creating a bottleneck. You're creating a point, one or two points of entry that people have to come through.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know, by me, that sounds pretty Arnorian. Or,
maybe.
The Hobbit thing where they have to come and get their writ of travel stamped and signed and then stamped 3 more times.
So which do you think came first? The road or the wall?
Well, let's take a look at this road over here, because this is a Hobbit road, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the road down to, there's the gate. And here's Bingo.
Yeah.
So this is well, that means that this is the Dwarf Road right here.
Yeah.
That we're on. So whoever built this fence built this arch, because this road, the Dwarf Road, clearly came before it. But I'm thinking of the east-west road here, which runs right along the side of it.
Well, and these could have
Okay,
been
it is continuous all the way back into No Bottle. So we do see the same. But look how much lower the fence is here.
Well, you can see there's been some flooding, and probably a river going through it that wasn't there before.
Yeah, probably so. Yeah, but we do see these stone walls here in No Bottle, having returned back to where we came from.
Much shorter, though.
But much, much shorter, exactly. These are just little, like, visual boundary walls. Even hobbits can get over these very easily.
Yeah, that's more of this is my side, that's your side.
Exactly,
Kind of
exactly. Whereas once we get out of town, and this arch seems to be more or less see, look at that up on the hill. This is the big wall here.
Yeah, construction's similar though, but
yeah. So the big wall turns. I like how the big wall has like these little like towers, little stone wall towers, right?
Yep.
Oh, all the way here to the other cliff. Yeah. Right. Yeah, and there's Rushik Bog and the Shire over there. Man, it extends all the way from here.
Bridge.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the other end of the wall, basically, which started at that other cliff, right? Yeah, Drowsnake, I agree. It now is really beginning to look like a border wall of the Yondershire.
To keep the big folk out?
Well, no, because here it's making a boundary between the Yondershire and the Shire, essentially.
It sounds more like it's marking jurisdictions between bounders.
Yeah, something like that. Something like that seems to me very likely.
They're political borders more than they are
right.
anything else.
And that the higher wall would be built here is not, I think, in order to make a defensive fortification to hold out the hordes of attacking Shire hobbits, but again could be used for like pasturage reasons or wolves or whatever. I mean, there's a number of things, probably primarily animals, that you would want to prevent wandering down. It does keep the Shire folk out of the overcrowded Yondershire pubs, Dolor's Stroke. That is very true. We can't underestimate that. But yeah, it does really seem like a boundary wall.
Maybe the original borders of the Shire before they expanded.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I do feel like just the size of it does feel like, whoops, we're getting some wolves coming in.
Right, did the Shire people build this up to keep wolves out of the Shire and stuff?
Or yeah, especially since it's fallen down in a lot of places, it's definitely not been kept up.
No, yeah, it's got lots of gaps. It's not really doing any job now.
Yeah. Like I said, if it's a political border instead of a strategic border, there'd be no need to patch up any holes. And as a matter of fact, as we saw, the stones in the Hobbit walls looked almost exactly the same. So I wouldn't be surprised if they raided some of the, parts that were already falling down.
Right. Hey, I want to mark out my lawn, so let me go borrow some of these already piled up stones, which are obviously not really doing anything anymore.
Yeah. I've got to keep Carrot Seed Gardener out of my yard.
Right, exactly. Whereas this here now...
It's crumbled.
Now look, the wall's on the map. I didn't notice that before. You can actually see the line of the wall crossing the field here, just southeast of the S in Old Links. Yep.
Interesting.
I wonder if they extended it out here. Because, of course, like, if it had been made by the Shire hobbits originally to mark out the boundary of the Shire, and then the yonder Shire folks just occupied the other side of it, right? But the Shire Hobbits presumably wouldn't have built it all the way down here, would they? I wouldn't think so.
I don't think so. And once again, like someone's pointing out, these are beautifully built straight roads.
Yes.
Walls over here that just, they hug the curves like a well-fitting bra.
Yeah, no, I mean it's very straight. It's a very well contrived wall. Let's since we're here again, let's just see where the road goes. We'll have to end after that, but so we continue. So we're now on the other side of that wall.
Beautiful willow trees.
Yeah, excellent willow trees by the river. Which river is this? Is the Brandywine we're about to cross? Up further north?
What is this? Can't see from here. I think it leads to the Brandywine at the very least, but it might be the Brandywine.
Okay.
Brandywine is to our east.
Yeah, that's what I.
Okay,
yeah.
we're still.
I think this leads into. This looks like a offshoot of Lake Evendon or something.
Yep, we're going to Oak Barton.
Yeah. We're headed towards Oak Barton. I just wanted to see the connection.
Oh, that is so pretty. The water with the trees.
Yes. All right, so we're headed up. All right, about to cross over into the Evendim region. What I'm particularly interested in seeing is how this interacts with the road to and from the Shire.
Oh.
Okay, so here's Bulror's sword.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
The links would be near Greenfield.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I see. Yes, I see. It's like we're right at the top of Brocken Moorings here.
Yes. Right. Okay, yeah, I think I have my bearings. So if we head down this way, we go straight down to the Brocken Moorings, right?
Yep.
Because we're right near the boundary there.
Absolutely. And here's Greenfield.
Right. Yep, got it. Okay, so there's the green fields. Okay, so if we go... Oh, I wish there were like an intermediate map level here. I know it's hard because they had the map zoned out before they added these new areas, So it makes it hard for them to kind of smooth out the maps to some extent. The landscape is smoothed out very nicely, but the all joins very nicely, but the map zones are more awkward. What I want is just one step zoomed out past this, but further in than the regional, so I can see the whole Yonder Shire, Oak Barton conjunction there.
I keep using my scroll wheel and then it doesn't work.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's just what I find myself wanting to do. Okay. So, but the thing that I wanted to see was where that road came in, and it's this one right here, where that road came in connection to the road to the Shire. So these two roads form the first intersection, the road out to the old links where we came from, and the road down to the Greenfields. They both meet and come together just on the very southern fringes here of Oatbarton.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Excellent.
And then up to Dwalling. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Okay. Remembering my geometry here. Oh, yeah. Hang on. Remind me... Drowsnake is saying you can almost see it on the Stable Master map. How do I get to the Stable Master map? Where is that again?
Go to the map and press the Stable Master map in the middle. Button toward the top.
But oh right, yeah. Aha.
You can also
Right.
get it from the collections window.
Got it. Okay. Right, so there's the Shire. There's the Yonder Shire. There's Ered Luin. Right there's Kellendim. Dualand. Okay. Yeah.
Why do you have that so small?
I don't know why it's so small.
Probably
I
your
can't-
UI because you're on a 4K monitor.
That's very likely. Something of that sort. I could very much wish that this map were a little larger, but whatever.
Might be in the works.
Okay, so... Right, there's Brockenborgs. Okay, so this is the Shire down here. There's Evendim up there. Got it. All right. Well, that's interesting. Here's my final observation about this. Now, the thing that we need to remember is the historical context of the Shire, which is this sort of southern, hunting range. What was mostly unsettled land just south of Annúminas and the land of the kings up here. Yonder Shire is not quite between them, right, but really off to the side. So the Shire is the area that's immediately south. Oatbarton, where we currently are, is right here at the very southern boundary, right? This is actually, Oatbarton is sort of an example, it would seem, of the Shire almost encroaching back into the land of Annúminas, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Probably, yeah, much like after Annúminas fell, obviously. So, the hobbits are thriving and expanding a bit, while obviously the Arnor is gone. But the Yonder Shire is definitely moving off, and it has almost a sense of being in between these two, but it isn't really in between. It's really off in the northwest there. What it is occupying the land, the otherwise empty land, in between the Shire and Ered Luin, the elf and dwarf lands there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Drusnake, thanks for reminding me about the Stable Master map here. This is a nice map to interact with.
It is really good.
Yeah. It's great. By the way, I love looking at Forakel on here. It gives me a much clearer sense of where Forakel is located in comparison.
I get how the ship got there.
Exactly. Yeah, you can really see that.
Huh.
Very interesting. Okay. All right. It's also fun to see the path of our explorations here.
Yeah. Boy, I've got a lot of empty ones up in the north.
Yes.
And speculate on future content.
Yes, well, certainly. One can do that as well. Especially if, one scrolls south to all of this empty land down here, just saying.
A little too empty.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
Well, I can dream.
We might find out next week.
We'll see.
The dev team is doing a special thing in Germany, of all places.
Oh, really? Cool. Okay. All right. Well, I'm gonna leave it there for the evening because it's getting late. But thanks everybody for joining us tonight. This was a fun boundary expo. I didn't really think we were going to spend all of our time looking and talking about a Stonewall fence this evening, but there we are. And we've gotten our bearings a little bit. And next time we totally will get to ruins. So thanks everybody for joining me. As I say, I won't be back next week, but I will be back the week after for further explorations. So thanks everybody. Thanks for joining me this evening, Delore. Good to hang out with you guys again.
hope you had a nice birthday.
Thank you. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Thank you. And we will see you guys in a couple weeks. If not, don't forget, tomorrow afternoon, we're talking to John Howe and Other Minds and Hands, and much more stuff going back. We're going to, I don't know if we're going to finish Alice in Wonderland this week, tomorrow night, but we're going to get there. We're going to talk about episode 3 of season 5 or 6. Season 6, that's where we are, in Film on Thursday night. And then Grifflet is going to come back. I haven't done a Grifflet stream in like a month. So more than a month, I think. So that'll be fun too. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Bye now.
Bye.